Hello everybody, and welcome to Something Who episode 14. It's back to the shorter format this week as we bring you our thoughts on the latest episode of Doctor Who, The Haunting of Villa Diodati. Thanks to those of you who continue to listen, primarily in the United Kingdom, where several times in the past month you've helped us to peak around 50 in the Apple podcast charts for our category. Also in Australia, the United States, Canada and a host of other places. Hello wherever you're listening, thanks for taking an interest in what we do and please spread the word. So I'm joined today not only by Simon.
Hello.
And Giles.
Hello.
But also, fresh from his sojourn in Los Angeles at the Gallifrey 1 convention, here's Paul.
Hello!
Woo!
Sorry, I decided not to leave as long a pause as Simon and Giles did. Anyone would think they were on satellite link from the Antipodes.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm here, back in the country. As you correctly divined, I've not quite got over the jet lag yet, but if my thoughts are less coherent than usual, I can only imagine how appalling that will be for everybody.
Excellent. So, The Haunting of Villa Diodati by Maxine Alderton. So the TARDIS crew meets Byron and the Shelleys. It's 1816 on a dark and stormy night, and just as Mary is about to write Frankenstein, in amongst the trappings of a ghost story, we also get the appearance of the lone Cyberman. Who wants to kick us off with some thoughts about this? That's the usual response.
Giles and I are on satellite links. There's a bit of a pause.
Should it be me?
I think so.
I'm just going to say that the reason I'm back here this week isn't just because of scheduling conflicts. It's because I've enjoyed this one significantly more than most of the episodes this season, and indeed last season. It seemed to me to thread sharp relief just what was slightly lacking, or sometimes a lot lacking, in the other episodes for me, by getting it all right. It's I don't mean to take anything away from this, damn it with faint praise. I think this is genuinely a proper piece of Who that would have worked beautifully in any era. The more I've watched it twice now, the more I watch it, the cleverer I think it is. It has it's an intriguing plot that keeps you guessing, and a resolution that doesn't feel disappointing or underwhelming. It's funnier than most episodes, and it's also scarier than most episodes. I mean, you know, I would like it if the series could have some sort of emotional impact every week, either funny or scary, to be honest. But I mean, to do both at the same time is quite a good trick. So it really is very impressive. And it just seemed to have a life and an energy and a spark to the dialogue. And when the dialogue's sparky, the characters come alive and everything starts working. So I was dead chuffed. I just wanted to come on the world. I'll come on here and tell the world that Maxine Alderton is my new hero. Maybe a bit too early to say Maxine Alderton for showrunner, but you know, Maxine Alderton for showrunner.
You heard it here first. Yeah, very good. Somebody else?
Yes, apparently this is what you get for having written 116 episodes of Emmerdale, says IMDb. 116 episodes of Emmerdale, 3 episodes of the Worst Witch.
Right.
Is her CV, and then she goes and does this.
Did any of them have Fraser Hines in it?
I don't think. No, apparently 2013 onwards. So
oh dear. Okay.
Unless Fraser's been back since, unless they've written him back in since I last watched Emmerdale. God knows how long ago that was. Probably when it was Emmerdale Farm. Yeah, I doubt it. But yeah, that was you get the writing right, and everything else falls into place. It seems it really was quite a mini masterpiece. Probably the best. I've enjoyed quite a lot. Yeah, I've enjoyed quite a lot of this season. While being willing to poke holes, I've certainly enjoyed this season much more, I think, consistently than the last. But it still felt like this was a significant raising of the bar compared to what we'd had anywhere else. Yeah, quite good. A sort of trad Doctor Who setup in some ways. You know, and you can certainly imagine them dropping them into this situation. But yeah, just really brilliant. And also shout out for the direction again. Who's the director? It's the same lady that did last week, isn't it?
Emma Sullivan.
Emma Sullivan, yeah, she's clearly a hot talent. It has to be said as well. It just really got everything bang on.
Good. Simon, thoughts from you?
Yeah, well, regular listeners will know I'm always bleating about the inconsistency of the show. One week it's fantastic and hits a real high, and the excitement mounts for the next week, and then it absolutely nosedives. And also in the previous series, I used to complain about the lack of scares and the lack of villains. And really, with this series, we've been spoilt for excellent villains. We had Zellin in Can You Hear Me? And this week we had the lone Cyberman, who I thought was excellent. And having had a great episode last week, I was a bit nervous about this week, but we had a fantastic, decent period drama, a lovely haunted house setting, and then a fantastic return, albeit for a lone Cyberman. And some of the dialogue and the facing off between the Dr. Jodie Whittaker and the lone Cyberman, that was really terrific. Really, really enjoyable. Yaz, I feel, is let down by the script. I think she's still very underused. I think there's bags of potential there that we haven't seen yet. Whereas Ryan just tends to let down the script still, unfortunately. So I desperately hope there's going to be a refresh of the crew when the series ends, or even sooner, preferably. Graham was very amusing, wandering around the haunted house, but managing to find a nice plate of food. That was very good. The supporting cast in this episode were really good and sustained the drama all the way through. Some interesting background as well. I think Byron is Ada Lovelace's father, who we saw earlier, so there was a nice bit of continuity there as well. I mean, it's good enough to get Paul back in the game here again, and I thought it was excellent. It's fantastic. It raised the bar, so we've had 2 consecutive good episodes, so I hope that's not going to ruin it for the season finale.
Yes, yeah, I mean, there is always that problem where, for every Earthshock, there's a time flight, isn't there? And for every Caves of Androzani, there's a twin dilemma. But, I mean, for me also, I mean, to 4 out of 4 of us, I thought the episode hardly put a foot wrong. I thought the dialogue was particularly standout. I mean, it was going back to the Stephen Moffat era with the witty one-liners, and it brought everything back to life, sparkled. Good character development as well. But I mean, most importantly, a cracking story, a story that kept me guessing and kept interest all the way through. So as far as I'm concerned, I hope they can bottle what they've done here and reproduce it time after time. And I'd say it's definitely the pick of the season. I mean, I really enjoyed the Judoon one as well, but this one pipped that as far as I was concerned. So yeah, I mean, I guess we've talked quite a lot about the struggles of the scripts. So what do you think was it that set this script, that made it work as a Doctor Who story?
And again, without damning it with faint praise, I do feel like this is what it should be like every week. And what it made me wonder is why the others weren't. I'd been wondering if Chris Chibnall was sucking some of the life out of the scripts. I couldn't understand why week after week different writers are writing in the same anemic fashion, with neither regulars or the guest characters getting the sort of dialogue that will bring their characters to life. Lacking drama in simple interactions. Any drama we got was just from plot mechanics rather than just humans being humans. So, it was so consistent. I just thought maybe somebody's doing this deliberately. Somebody's script editing them and painting shades of grey over whatever these writers have produced. And then suddenly we get an episode which is sparking with life and individuality. So I'm just going to leave that with a ... I don't wish to imply that the other writers we've had were not up to it. I'm not familiar with any of their work, but perhaps they weren't aiming high enough. Perhaps they thought Doctor Who required a certain level of writing, and Maxine aimed higher. I just don't know. It's baffling.
It has to be said, I guess. One thing that having that much Emmerdale on your CV, if there's one thing that soaps teach you, absolutely, it's through writing character and just getting that kind of interactions in the Woolpack or wherever it may be. But she didn't come out with some zingers here. I mean, I think my personal favourite was the Lights One, but he's gone on a mini break.
Yes. Yes.
See, way back at the beginning of the last season, when I was complaining there was a lack of wit in the stories, I kept using that particular phrase, and I think I confused people. And I thought people thought I wanted jokes, wit in the literal sense, but I just meant life and intelligence and a line of dialogue. If it's functional make it. You can get across exposition and functional dialogue in an interesting way, as easily as a
yes.
boring
So that dance scene, for instance.
And if there's a gap,
sorry, that dance scene was a fantastic way of doing it. Sorry, you're probably going to say that.
No, but I'll pretend. I mean, I think the dancing was a particularly good illustration of what I'm saying. I don't know. It seemed to bring the acting up a level. Again, I can't believe that they cast better actors this week, but everybody seemed much more solid and less like. I mean, sometimes the acting's been dropping down to not what you might expect from a flagship television program, I suppose.
Well,
and here,
Doctor Who's always been a bit vulnerable to that, of people bringing their Doctor Who performance and doing it for their kids, as it were. And even very good actors have sometimes been guilty of that. And you think, well, there's no excuse for,
So I don't know if whoever played Mary Shelley was any better than was any better than the actress who played Ada Lovelace, but the character came to life because there was literally nothing to Ada Lovelace in that episode other than, hello, I'm Ada Lovelace, I'm a computing genius, or rather the Doctor telling her and us who she is. And then, having drawn a sketch of the character, they didn't seem to feel the need to put it into the dialogue, whereas here and Byron was fantastic. And the Cyberman, goodness me. I mean, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say I think that's the best Cyberman we've ever had in 54 years.
Yep.
I've got a sort of I've always lent towards slightly more human-y Cybermen, less purely robotic. And I don't want to get into Doctor Who fanish details because I realise they're supposed to be emotionless and supposed to have lost most of their. I've always thought they looked more interesting when they lean more towards the Borg, and I don't like to say that out loud. It's a shorthand for what I'm trying to say. I'm not saying we should ignore everything they did in the first 20 years and rip off the Borg, but I just can't help thinking it's more interesting because otherwise they are just ordinary robots, and the only thing that distinguishes them is having handles on their heads. So both the look here and in particular the characterisation, there's some nasty lines. I thought for a minute it was going to fall into the sort of sentimental trap that a lot of Doctor Who nowadays seems to at the end. I thought, and we were being directed to think that Mary Shelley was going to win the Cyberman over by appealing to its, which of course is what happens in many run-of-the-mill episodes. And not only did they turn it on its head, they turned it on its head in a spectacularly vicious fashion, with him talking about killing his own children. And it was a wonderful performance. I'm glad that he seems to be back again next week. Just hope they can keep that up.
Yes, when Maxine's not doing the dialogue. Yeah.
We've had tiny little glimmers of Cybermen that are a bit more physically, have more of their humanity left, haven't we? Whether little bits in Attack of the Cybermen, I think, which wasn't done particularly well. And it's been inconsistent. There was that was it in the Pandorica Opens when Moffat put in a cyber head that opens up and has a skull that falls out, just for a cheap shock. But they are inconsistent. There have clearly been different ways the Cybermen have been manufactured throughout time and space. They went through a phase of dressing in swimwear in Cyberwoman by Chris Chibnall, didn't they? Yeah. But here I really think we've got the best of both worlds. Oh, that's a Borg episode, so no pun intended.
Very good.
It was an accident. Don't look at me like that.
Yeah. No, I mean, I'd agree with you, Paul, that whilst I've always loved the Cybermen in concept, I think in reality we've often had something that was less than that. There was the one fantastic episode, really only, the World Enough and Time, where we get to see the start of the Cybermen, or yet another start of the Cybermen, which is full of suspense, but sort of at the point at which they actually become Cybermen. And then the following episode, it all kind of fell apart a bit. But that the suspense and the idea of those humans turning into Cybermen was handled, I thought, quite effectively. I mean, Spare Parts from Big Finish, if I may, Big Finish is obviously the classic in that regard, and probably delivers something that the series itself never quite managed.
It's funny you should mention Big Finish. There was some consternation among Big Finish fans because this is a slightly deeper cut here. But when became apparent this was an episode where the Doctor visits Mary Shelley and her friends on the night that she is inspired to write Frankenstein, and that she meets a Cyberman, which may or may not prove as part of the inspiration. People couldn't help thinking of two well-known Big Finish stories wherein the Doctor visits Mary Shelley on the night in which she writes Frankenstein and meets a Cyberman.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a hell of a coincidence. It obviously is a coincidence. Somebody would have known, and somebody would have said, let's just do it again, it's too good an idea. You know, I can forgive them for that. It was actually two different stories. There was the telling ghost stories by the lake evening.
Yeah.
And then the Doctor picks up Mary Shelley and takes her away to be his companion as the eighth Doctor. And then in their first story together, she meets a Cyberman, which is an excellent Mark Platt story, who of course wrote Spare Parts.
Yes.
They do keep intentionally or otherwise mining his best stuff. And to compare it to it just suddenly struck me, this could almost be the Dalek of Cybermen stories.
Yes.
You know?
Yes, that's a good point.
Dalek sort of made them terrifying and formidable again by centering on a single example. Single battered example, which was holding on to its nature against all odds. I'm happy to call it that. I'm going to call it Cyberman. It's shorter than the Haunting of Villa Diodati.
Yeah. Yeah, and
I'm not really.
and you know, coming back to the idea of doing this, you know, the same story twice. I mean, let's face it, Barry Letts revisited Atlantis twice in 2 seasons with you know, back in the 70s, so it wouldn't be the first time.
No, it's clearly going to be more and more of a problem as Doctor Who moves on through the decades. The programme used to contradict itself. Now it's contradicting the novels and the audios, because there's only ever going to be more and more of all three media and comics and whatever. So it's just something we're going to have to get used to.
Yes.
And we're not even going to have to expect them to explain it away in the script like they did, whether it was intentional or not, with Ada Lovelace, where the Doctor wiping her memory. We didn't have to go through that here. I mean, again, it's in the subtext if you want. Time was being changed. This wasn't what was supposed to happen. Big Finish fans can read between the lines there and say that this isn't supposed to happen because the Doctor's been there before and has literally seen it. Whereas viewers will be ordinary viewers will be thinking she knows that because she's read history books. So, you know, but it's just something we're going to have to get used to. And some people will shout time war. It's a program about time travel. We're just going to have to get used to the idea that it can't be a single linear timeline. There are going to be ripples and waves.
Oh, absolutely, yes.
We could fool ourselves into thinking it was nice and consistent for the first few decades, but
but we'd be wrong.
Yeah.
Yes.
In 500 years' time, when our great space grandchildren are watching it, they won't understand why we're even worried about such things.
I was just going to say on that particular riff is interesting. As much as people have wanted to make ground theories out of bits of pyramids of Mars and things, sort of trying to work out how time travel really works and alterations to history may or may not work within Doctor Who, it's always refused to be nailed down. And given that this is, you know, given it's a fictional concept, you know, if we're talking from a scientific point of view, there are plenty of cosmologists out there who believe that time travel is impossible precisely because this kind of causality thing, you know, cannot be allowed to create, or either that or when you build a time machine you can't go back to before the time machine has been created. But I was just thinking about the comparison with the way that the Marvel universe handled it in Avengers Endgame. Spoilers, everybody. Was it this time last year? I guess so.
God, it was.
But yes, with regard to their sort of branching, you know, they definitely go down a complete branching reality kind of situation where changes made in the past don't ripple into the future. And it's just quite interesting the way that we, as viewers, tend to try and, you know, want to impose some kind of sense onto what is a fairly nonsensical concept and make up what are essentially arbitrary rules about what can and can't happen.
Are you saying we really need
in a time travel story?
We need Tilda Swinton to pop up looking all wise and explain everything. Draw divergent timelines in the air. Well, she can explain to Mark Ruffalo as the Incredible Hulk. She can explain to the average Doctor Who viewer.
Well, having seen David Copperfield at the weekend, I'd welcome Tilda Swinton just turning up to chase donkeys off our lawn.
Do you mean the American Magician or the one out of Three of a Kind?
Neither of the above.
Oh, my mistake. The third David Copperfield.
The third David Copperfield. The first David Copperfield.
Yeah, but nobody remembers that. Most people just remember Lenny Henry and Tracy Ullman's co-star. He was hilarious, wasn't he?
So whatever happened to him? Anyway.
Eerie silence. Yeah.
So we changing the subject slightly. I got Castrovalva vibes out of the middle of this story. And, I was beginning to concoct in my head this notion that the Master had created this villa and we were going to see a reappearance of his character, and then it went in a different direction. But that was an interesting parallel that in the end turned out not to be one.
Yeah, they threw in lots of gimmicks, traditional haunted house tropes like poltergeist stuff, things flinging themselves about, and the uncanny topography is less commonly seen in ghost stories, but that was another nice. It had lots of ideas, just like most stories nowadays have a lot of ideas. But for me, this time they all meshed together. They felt stylistically, thematically, they gelled, and they're explained away well. Neither of which has always been the case. One of my particular grumbles has been about stories feeling like they're just a random grab bag of ideas, which have been smushed together against their will, and fail to adhere. Whereas here, they just did. It's often, in Doctor Who, whenever you do a ghost story in Doctor Who, it always runs the risk of there's going to be a point at which you reveal it's all just technology and science behind it, not real ghosts. And of course that's inevitable, but it still can be done well or badly. I've seen examples where I was disappointed because you lose some of the atmosphere when it changes to technology. That's maybe in Big Finish more than on television. And you just think, I was preferring the ghost story. You lost it at the end there. And here, no, it managed to hold on to the atmosphere all the way through.
Well, they had their cake and ate it too, didn't they? Because there was still a thought that there might be a ghost.
Yes, I assume it was just a gag.
Yeah. Or maybe something that they'll pick up later. Who knows?
Well, yes, good question. But it was nice. Yeah, the Cyberman turns up. Smack on the midpoint of the story. Just look at it structurally, but the Cyberman is such a force of nature and is so well done that yes, it doesn't lose. It just adds another layer of creepiness to it instead of diffusing the creepiness that they've spent the first half of the story. I shouldn't praise this story by comparing it to an imaginary version which did some things differently. But for example, it could have been revealed this wasn't a real haunted house. They could have all melted away like the Star Trek holodeck, and they could have all been in a spaceship or simulation. That would have spoiled it. If it had been a gleaming, silver, shiny Cyberman, that wouldn't have really fitted. But because it was a gothic, macabre, Frankenstein of a Cyberman. I mean, of course it was, because that was the whole point of putting the two together. But you know what I mean? It just made all the right choices all the time.
Simon, have you got some thoughts about the story?
Well, I was just sitting back enjoying listening. Paul was...
That's not what we pay you for.
Paul was on the money about that being one of the best Cyberman appearances ever, because I think you need that underlying human menace, and seeing his mask broken and being able to see the person lurking within, that was very, very good. And then the horrible line about not caring about the baby and the fate of his own children. That was fantastic scripting, and I'm sure it made all the kids jump as well. So that was very, very good. But yeah, that was one of the best ever Cyberman stories. I think it was that good.
It was subverting expectations, not just for us, but for the Doctor, because we were used to the idea that the Cybermen, what they do is take good, ordinary, decent people and strip away their humanity. It was just interesting to see the Doctor flawed by the fact that this was somebody who was obviously a nasty piece of work already. Well, was that clear? Anyway, but the mental process of losing humanity happened alongside the mechanical process. How many threads have been left hanging over? Somebody sent the Cyberium through to the past from the future to try and hide it from the Cybermen to stop them rebuilding themselves. Is this right? At a point at which they were losing the cyber war, and they were going to use the Cyberium to recover somebody, send it back, and we don't know who. Is that right? Okay, just checking.
Yes, that's my understanding.
And that may come from, I suppose, the final part of this story. Who knows? Or part of the season, rather. And of course we've still no idea how this fits in with the Master and with Ruth's Doctor, if indeed it does.
No. To be honest, there are so many things hanging over that I can't think we're going to fit them all in the next 2 episodes. It'll be interesting to see which do get returned to.
And I like that. As a general point, I prefer them to concentrate on dealing with this particular aspect of it properly. I guess we'll wait and see whether Chibnall's denials that Jack is back, whether they turn out to be accurate or not, and if it turns out he's lied good on him. So far as I'm concerned, that's completely where, as the showrunner, it's pretty much in the job description that you have to lie about that sort of thing, and the only option in that scenario is to lie flat out and say no, he's not coming back. But presumably, what we saw in episode 5 connected to this scenario. So with Jack having some knowledge of that, it would be perhaps odd if that doesn't turn up. But hopefully the Wiz stuff and the Master stuff and so on are going to be left hanging over and just allowed to tantalise us a bit further.
Yeah, certainly for me, I'd sooner they made a good job of finishing this story off with the Cybermen really well, rather than try to get everything and resolve all of it in the couple of hours that are left, and made a mess of it because there was too much stuff and not enough time.
Just trying to think how this connects to, or whether this is going to connect to Nightmare in Silver. It's years since I've seen that.
Yes, I can barely remember it, but I've seen people saying that was set around a big cyber war, which obviously was bigger and further in the future than the stuff from Revenge of the Cybermen and Earthshock. It's a lot further ahead than that, isn't it?
Yes, that had that referred to the Siberiad.
Oh, okay.
As being the cyber consciousness.
Interesting.
Kind of thing.
So it's changed. It's changed its declension.
Well, it's sort of from Greek through
Siberiad,
Siberian. Latin jokes there for
Siberiad is a Greek ending, isn't it? I think Siberium's the Latin one.
Oh, there you go.
No,
you don't get this quality content on certain other podcasts, do you?
We know what our audience want. They want Greek and Latin jokes. Don't you?
Well, we certainly want classics every week. That's for sure.
O tempora, o mores.
Did you call me O tempora, O Morris?
Very good.
Oh dear. There you go. You can have that one for your next script, Paul.
Wow.
So, I mean, nice stuff, I think, from the Doctor this week and from Jodie Whittaker.
Oh,
so,
yes.
I kind of liked the bit. I mean, I already mentioned the dancing, and I thought that was a fantastic way of having a scene in which there's a lot of exposition without making it feel like there's a scene in which there's a lot of exposition. But anyway, the Doctor then gets bored of the dancing and says, "Ghost stories, anyone?" or something like that, and starts. But all they want to do is another dance. But I kind of liked the way that she was trying to move the whole thing on in an unsubtle way. It was a nice mix of both the performer but also the script. Quite like that.
Well, the irony of it was that until the stuff with Bowen's absence was highlighted, it started to look like it was them turning up that had knocked things off course.
It did
because
look like that,
Bowen reading ghost stories was how the whole idea for them to write their own started off. And so at a certain point, I was thinking, they buggered up history here.
And the Doctor got some as well as being very sparky all the way through, she got some very dramatic stuff to do at the end, which is either symptomatic of the nice contrast in this episode as a whole, or because we're heading towards the season finale and the Doctor is being pushed into these areas. I mean, she's again distancing herself from her family, as she has in a few previous episodes, isn't she?
Yes, the team structure is no longer flat.
The cracks are appearing.
Yeah, and
I must say, I prefer it. Just gives an extra dimension to the character.
It's slightly unfair to them because it's not. She's encouraging them to think of themselves as just friends, like they're all on the same level. So it's rather unfair to suddenly turn around and say, "How dare you think we're all in this together?" But there you go. I think she was fooling herself as well as them.
Yes, exactly. I think that's the point, that it came across as a character thing. It came across as a character thing in itself. The fact that she's setting herself up and having a pop at them about it. as much as it reads as you suggest, Paul, rather than coming off as being like a character inconsistency in how they've been treating her. So it doesn't. I felt like it, which is good.
It's almost the first time that we've seen the sexuality of the Doctor come up since Jodie's taken over, with the way that Byron starts to become flirtatious and sort of slightly besotted with her. So we talked about that last year, about she's almost playing the role asexually. And I mean, clearly the Doctor isn't all that interested in Byron, but nonetheless, you can see that's suddenly become a thing.
Talking of which, I'm not reading too much into this, am I? Is it now confirmed, or slightly more confirmed, that Yaz has a crush on the Doctor?
Well, she appears to have a crush, but I mean, I don't know whether it's it's that kind of love interest type crush, or just the sort of fascination. Yeah, but there's something there.
I wouldn't have read that much into it if it wasn't for the context where she was comparing.
Yeah, indeed.
She was comparing those feelings and that relationship to. Who was it? Who was she talking to? The Byron and Byron's lady friend.
Claire Claremont.
Byron and yeah.
Apparently, according to the credits,
Bones,
it sounds like
yes.
it sounds almost like character from Phoenix Nights.
I'm struggling to remember why I already had that in my head from last year. Was there something, a tiny little nod towards that last year?
It was Yaz's mum in Spiders. Yeah,
Was it all it was?
I mean, there were other kind of
Was it anything
vague moments, but I think that was really what put it into everyone's heads.
It's amazing just how real Graham seemed. It was an embarrassment at Rich's, what with him trying to find some food and trying to find a toilet. Well, either one of those would have been enough to make him seem human. But
yeah.
And Ryan, for my money, works better. Is better relegated to comic relief.
Yes.
Yeah. I thought he got a couple of good. He got a couple of good chuckles from me.
Well, he was in character
for his gags and doing chopsticks.
And Chopsticks was
funny.
Good. No, well,
Chopsticks gag was good.
I saw Tosin Cole being interviewed at the Gallifrey convention, and it confirmed what I already suspected from seeing a few minutes of interviews with him here and there. He is so much more charismatic in real life than Ryan.
Yeah,
and it makes me rather irritated that they've taken this an engaging young performer and somehow sucked all the life out of him.
Yeah,
and I can't work out if making him do this Sheffield accent.
Yeah, that's not helping.
The start or the end of the problem, or if it's just the icing on the cake.
I think there's that, and there's his inability to cycle, and so I think he's got too much going on in his head. He's trying to remember all the quirks of Ryan the character rather than just get on and be engaging.
Yeah, even the thing about him struggling to get the right notes on the piano, Eric Morecambe style. It's a tiny little moment, but if you're going to remember that he's dyspraxic, that's the way to do it. A little moment, it's funny, it's sweet, it's here and gone. Better than ignoring it or having some clunky thing about him, I don't know, tripping over the stairs. But I'll stop gushing. Or maybe I shouldn't stop gushing. Who knows how long it'll be before I'm allowed to gush again.
No, it's good to have some fresh perspective on Ryan, Paul, because I'm guilty of quite a lot of Ryan bashing. But again, that what you've just said is in keeping with the inconsistency. They seem to still be trying to carve out a character and find some role for him. And we're almost at the end of the second series. They really should have nailed that by now.
Yeah, indeed.
Did anyone else notice? Well, they must have done probably where the Doctor was referred to as Mrs. Doctor. That made me chuckle. I'm sure there's a few fanboys on Planet Mondas chuckling about that.
Yeah. Do you know what? Almost everything we're picking up here, whether it's the tiniest little joke, is just an example of how clever this is. Because when our hero arrives in a scenario and says, "I'm the Doctor," I mean, it's something we have to gloss over, because otherwise, in real life, people would say, "You're the what?" No, but what's your name? Or they'd be saying Doctor Who every week. Yeah. So you either ignore the way real people would react, or you have a laborious explanation. And just I've not seen that one before. Have somebody not assume, but I don't know, just for the sake of convenience, act as if that's her name rather than her title. It's new and funny and different. I don't know. Oh, I'm so happy I might go and watch it again.
I wondered for a second if that was Dominic Cummings under the mask as the Cyberman, because he seemed to be absolutely obsessed by the Guardian. I thought maybe he was trying to seek it out and eliminate it.
Oh, you've been sitting on that joke for 38 minutes.
Waiting for an inopportune moment to present it to you, yeah. But then on the other hand, there's that lovely line also with the Cyberman had of "Do not be afraid, little one, you will be like us."
Yeah.
From Cybermen of old. I like that.
Yep, old line. Very scary to be directing as a baby. There was a scary bit with a baby in Love and War by Paul Cornell novel years and years ago, which still haunts me. So it's an easy way to send the shivers down the spine, isn't it?
Going back to Yaz, so she at some point has that line about, technically the Doctor only told us not to follow her, so let's split up. So they are still kind of trying to get the sense that Yaz is one of the more adventurous ones, and will push at the boundaries that the Doctor has set. As in, I suppose, Praxius when that happened. But unfortunately, it's a bit few and far between.
There's a tiny nod to her Law and Order background when she catches Lady Doodar breaking and entering.
Yes.
Yeah, true.
Which I'll take over nothing.
Yes, yes, exactly. At least it shows they've remembered it this week.
I think she should say hello, hello, hello whenever she catches somebody. Up to no good. Then would remember. Oh yes, she's a policewoman. Yeah. Let's be Avenue.
You're next.
Tell Ryan he has the right to remain silent.
So do we think that we over-egg it a bit with the whole Shelley stuff and how important it is that Shelley survives?
Well, yeah, I don't know. Well, no.
Well, Hugh Bennett would have been out of a job, wouldn't he?
They seem to be having their cake and eating it. Oh, very good. They seem to be hedging their bets, though, with two different ways they could have gone with it. You could have lent completely on the idea words are important. Just because he's only a poet, his poetry will inspire millions. Who knows how many civilizations will rise and fall based on the words of Shelley. You could have made the whole thing about him. But I think if you'd gone that way, he would have needed to be a much bigger character throughout the episode. Whereas they somehow managed to mix and match that with the more hard sci-fi idea that if he dies, because he had some influence, he's not just a rando. Yeah, he's an important enough figure that it would cause the ripples, butterfly effect.
Yes,
and who knows what would change. And so it's rather unusual. I mean, that could happen every week, of course. Yeah. Every time they're in history, the Doctor could be saying, "No, we have to fix this because it will bugger up your future. You won't exist." It's interesting that she chose this occasion. It didn't seem to be any more relevant to this occasion than it is any time they're in history to me, unless it was supposed to be because history had already been changed by the arrival of the Siberiad, and that she wanted to put it back on track. I don't know. It wasn't entirely clear, but it wasn't unclear in a way that ruined it for me.
It was arguable so I agree with you for that point, but it was arguable to me that it's more important that Mary Shelley writes Frankenstein than that Percy Shelley writes his poetry. I mean, yes. I know that Percy Shelley is an important poet in English literature, but in the end, probably more people, maybe fewer people have read Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, but more people have been influenced by Frankenstein, the films, the TV series, whatever else.
And you're right. I don't know why they didn't go that direction. They slightly, I could have done with a two-parter on this, if only because there was so much you could have done. And if you probably could have done all the things, achieved its full potential in 2 episodes. As you've got Mary Shelley, Percy Shelley and Byron there, you could have gone in 1,000 directions. I mean, Byron's just there as a comic relief character, really, but it reminded me that in the first, after episode 2 with Ada Lovelace, the Big Finish plugged a story that I wrote. And here's me plugging it again, which featured Ada Lovelace. But in the Ada Lovelace story, we did feature her being haunted by the ghost of Byron, so they could easily have plugged it again this week. And as you say, regardless of Percy Shelley and his lovely poetry, and Lord Byron and his overlong epics, Mary Shelley is clearly the central figure here and the most important. So it might have made more sense to write it, I don't know, for the Doctor to hint that she was the point in time that needed to be protected.
Yes. I mean, I'm picking nits for the sake of it, really, because I enjoyed the story enough that I'm not really all that bothered about it, but it just seemed a slightly odd emphasis.
The only other thing I was going to say was, given that we had a pretty large supporting cast, plus our usual issue of the potentially overcrewed TARDIS, this felt like there was enough going on and enough remixing that it didn't really, you didn't really feel like they found enough interesting things to do with all these different characters.
It was
we didn't suffer too much from the classic stand around while the Doctor explains everything.
It was very, very pacey, and I got the feeling. I mean, it could have been written that way. What we saw could have been exactly what was written in the script, but I got the feeling that it had been edited very tightly in an attempt to keep all the scenes there, but just keep them nice and sharp, rather than having a slower pace and losing whole scenes, which often is what people do in editing. Seems to be what people do in editing. And I saw somebody compare it to Ghostlight, the atmosphere of the house, and watching it a second time with that in my head, I actually thought it reminded me a bit of Ghostlight. Sometimes in the pacing and the fact that was cut down quite heavily as well. It's got something with the constant cutting between people split up around the house, not spoon feeding the viewer into knowing what the connections were at any given moment. There's a lot in the early stages. A lot going on in different locations, which would cut.
I mean, perhaps the Emmerdale thing again. The soap operas have a huge cast of characters, and yet they always seem to find things for them to do, and so the answer to the problem of how do you deal with all those characters is, well, find lots of incident, and then they'll all be occupied doing stuff. Perhaps the problem has been with the other stories that there hasn't been enough going on, so that there have been too many spare parts.
No pun intended. Well, there you go.
So, final thoughts before we wind up. Simon, any final thoughts?
More, please.
Yes, very good.
No, that's been a very entertaining chat, even if I say so myself. That was a fantastic episode. I hope it hasn't squeezed the last remaining quality out of the series, because the bar's definitely been raised overall, and I hope it's set up nicely for the finale.
Giles, have you got to say that you haven't had a chance to squeeze in yet?
Not really. I feel like I've said pretty much everything that I had thought to bring up. It's nice to see Jodie being given the chance to actually show what she can do, and being given some really strong dialogue that actually lets her play to her strengths. And because we know she's a damn good actress, but she has been unfortunately underserved at various times by somewhat boilerplate, generic, wacky Doctor stuff, and it feels like this series they have started layering in more interesting and more depth to her character, but this ramped it up a notch in that regard. So hopefully, fingers crossed, the next 2 weeks are going to see that and everything else that went so well in this one built upon.
Sure. There were 3 bits of dialogue that I liked that were, well, so one of them was my absolute favourite, perhaps for obvious reasons, where someone says, I don't think they're really from the colonies, and then someone else says, no, she's from somewhere much stranger. Then Dr. Polidori just says, the North. Beautifully cut as well as well delivered.
I have to admit, I only caught that on this. I only caught that on my second. On my second watch.
And the other 2 were
nice.
The Doctor's rules. So the first one was the set of 3 rules. Nobody mentions Frankenstein, don't interfere, and nobody snog Byron, which just made me smile. But then at the end, she's saying she has the planets in 2 steps, and the first step is to save Shelley, and the second step is fix the mess I created in step 1. So. Yeah, I thought all of that. I mean, it was classic 13th Doctor, but somehow just improved a notch, maybe from other examples. Paul, I'd rather cut you off first time round. Any final thoughts you've got?
I haven't got any final thoughts. I've remembered one more thing I really liked, and as we seem to be using this section as a roundup, I liked, because I'm very macabre as an individual, I liked the way that she got the Siberia thing out of Shelley. Of all the things you could have made up, plot mechanisms, plot devices to get to do that, pushing him mentally forward to his own death to shock it into letting go, is rather dark, and again in keeping with the whole tone. Rather than some sort of silly MacGuffin. If we're going to invent new abilities for Time Lord, yes, that's one that you would not. That's one you'd want to use sparingly, isn't it? I thought that was very clever. So
that was the only thing that that did catch me by surprise in that regard, because the whole business with it is inhabiting the Doctor for literally a couple of minutes, whatever. And I thought, we're going down that route, are we? And thinking that was going to be a springboard into the finale.
Yes.
And then instead it got away.
So did I, but it was just a sort of link between where we were and what we, I guess, knew was coming, because we had it set up in episode 5, which again added an extra thrill to this episode. It would have been good enough on its own, but because we came into it knowing, with that rule in big flashing neon lights, don't give the Cyberman what it wants, there's an extra layer of tension to the ending. And the Doctor, and we could see the logical steps by which the Doctor ends up in a situation where she has no alternative. So yes, well done.
And the last thing we needed was for a repeat of Nightmare in Silver, where Jodie starts acting strange because she's half possessed by a cyber something or other.
No, that's true.
Well, so we've got 2 more episodes to come. I propose that we do another shortish one next week, having seen the first of those, and then we'll probably go for one of our classic compare the final episode to something else. So I guess get your thinking caps on over the next week or so about what that might be, that classic story. And in the meanwhile, we'll probably meet again in just under a week to chew over what we made of Sunday's episode. Thanks all. Thanks for sharing your thoughts. It's great to have you back, Paul. So thanks for that.
Oh, don't get used to it.
Yeah, and Giles and Simon, always good to catch up.
See you, boys. Good night, viewers. Bye, everyone. Bye.
Good to speak to you all.
Splendid. And then I'm going to do a little bit of narration, and it usually goes horribly wrong, but we'll see how we get on.
You're much closer to your webcam this week. Is it because you're on location?
Yeah, well, it's a different webcam.
So nothing you can do about that. Can you shrink your head or something? Just temporarily.
No, I'm afraid it's this big or nothing.
Okay, carry on.
You just have to look away if you don't like it. Am I like the giant John Pertwee in The Mind of Evil, laughing at you or something? It's unintentional.
Ada Lovelace's father. Nearly said the wrong.
Is she Lovelace?
Yeah, I nearly said the naughty name there. I was trying not to. Ada Lovelace.